This is Framelines. We go on location and put the spotlight on people, places, and things related to making movies. I'm Johnny DiLoretto, and I'll be your host as we show you the behind the scenes of all kinds of movies being made right here near you.
Framelines is brought to you in part by grants by the Greater Columbus Arts Council, Planetary Media, state-of-the-art with an emphasis on art.
Are you guys, anybody union here? Can we talk about unions?
Yeah, I'm union.
So what's the advantage and disadvantage of being in a union, especially in a market like this?
There are both. You get paid. You get paid, well, so not to say that non-union talent doesn't get paid. You get paid at a different rate. You sometimes get a preference to audition times, but a disadvantage to it can be, and the union I think is also cognizant of it, that in a market like Columbus or Central Iowa or any of the surrounding cities, there's just not a lot of truly working actors. It's not the same environment as a Chicago or a New York or an LA or even in Austin, Texas, or New Orleans is huge.
Right.
So they're cognizant of it, and there are ways to work non-union jobs as a union actor. It depends a lot on the contracts. And I think they're more and more understanding of it than they were previously. Yeah. And also for independent projects. And I think this is the other thing for filmmakers. Don't be afraid to look at the independent contracts for working with SAG-AFTRA actors, because they're out there. It doesn't, sometimes it's a deferred payment contract. You know, and I've done several projects that were like that. So, but the advantages are that I think when you get into larger markets, when someone sees that you're a SAG-AFTRA actor, they know that you've had a certain amount of experience, that you've had to do a certain kind of level of projects, and that makes a difference.
Okay. Any other insights?
Well, I think there's a disadvantage to becoming a union actor before you're really ready, because then you're competing with other union actors, and that can kind of leave you out of the loop, and maybe you just need a little more experience, and as a non-union actor you would be in there competing with non-union people and getting more work. I'm non-union, and I still get to audition for union work in this market. I don't have the priority as a union person would, but I'll still get called in to audition, so I don't think not being a union member hurts me in that regard. Okay. But, and then too, I also will negotiate for pay on an independent project too. And I mean, sometimes it might just be, help me put together a reel, and you know, or it might not be actual money, but some kind of back and forth. But I think the thing I've seen is I've seen people get SAG cards too soon, maybe, and then you know they're complaining because they can't get any union work, and there's not a lot of union jobs out there. So, and it's a lot of paperwork. So if someone is a union actor and you want to put them in a non-union film, you can do the paperwork, but the person better be worth it for that. So I think that can hurt. But yeah,
Right.
I'm not avoiding joining the union, but
right. No, I understand.
Just,
I'm
pushing it.
There's always this kind of, you got to weigh when's the time to do that. And
it's an investment. I mean, it's not inexpensive either.
Yeah.
So
that's I'm exactly in the same boat as Christina. I've almost every project I've done in the last couple of years has been they've gotten the SAG union indie contract things, and I've not tried to Taft-Hartley in on anything. I've kept pushing that off because I'm not ready to do it, and I'm not against it, but like John said, there's an investment that has to be made. There's, what is it, $1,200 now for your initial payment to join?
I thought it was more than that.
More than that?
Yeah. I think it's more.
There's certain things that you have to invest in that. Is it 2,000? 3,000.
But can you do that over time? Is that one of these things you can do it quarterly or bi-yearly or?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
I'm waiting for the job that has that as the paycheck, and then I'll join.
No, I mean, working as a cinematographer in Los Angeles, I was, starting to get into the budgets, and it was like, do I go union or not?
Sure.
And I realized I was not at that point where if I go in union, it's going to cost me work. So I just couldn't afford to make that jump. So
there's also parts of the union that really do protect the actors. So you can be on a project, and let's say it's a commercial thing, and they could say, okay, well, this is going to be for broadcast, but then they 2 months later change their mind, and then they throw it out on the web, or they cut out what you've done and they put it into a radio spot. And the union helps to protect you, to make sure that as an actor that you're compensated for that duly,
right,
as you should be. But yeah.
What is the kind of the percentage for you of what you wrote versus the final product? How close is it to what you wrote and the intentions of your writing to final product for you?
It's not really what I begin with when I'm writing and vision. You have to basically edit again on set. You here's my limitations, here's what it is, and you have to change your script again. And then I edit a lot of my shorts, and then I change it again. It's like you can't be married to anything.
They've always called editing the final rewrite. Mm-hmm. They say there's 3 versions. There's the script on paper, the script that you shoot, and then what you do in the edit.
Right. It is always better in my head. It's always better in my head than what it ends up being.
That's not true now.
Really?
Heart turned out really well. The remake of Heart turned out really well. Was it better in your head?
What? I like it in my head.
But is it better than the final product?
Of course not.
You can't say that because they're recording.
What?
And I was the producer.
No, Heart was the only exception. It was you that produced it.
There you go.
Talk about a little bit about how you went from writing novels to screenplays, or did you start screenplays and go novel, and compare the two?
I started off actually as a fiction writer, went to grad school, began to formally kind of train as a screenwriter, and then I took a break from filmmaking right after grad school, wrote 2 novels in a year, and they both got published, which was really exciting, but terrifying in the same way. But what I learned from that experience is somehow being a novelist made me a better screenwriter, and being a screenwriter made me a better novelist. It's because I have a natural ear for dialogue, and I can really hear that click in my head. So it was about kind of combining those 2 worlds and sort of bringing them together to see how does one facilitate the other and make them stronger. So I can't separate the 2 as far as they're like these sort of separate existence, but rather it's just one of those things where, one has an internal world, which is the novel. You have the internal world of the mind of the character, and the screenplay is very visual based, and dialogue, and you have that nice little even, cut between the 2, unless you're Kevin Smith.
Yeah, that's true. What about kind of this is kind of everybody. What about that theory that, a screenplay, I've heard kind of the formal rule is you can, in a novel, you can write things like, you write about Steven's in the room. He's a college graduate but doesn't have a job. Whereas in a screenplay, if you write that, that's not, there's the whole thing about the rule of, in a screenplay, you're supposed to write in the description only what you can see so that they can then shoot it. You can't write that. You'd have to write instead of Stephen,
right?
Instead of saying Stephen is a college graduate, you say pan across a diploma.
Well,
and then pan across the kind of,
but those are
the
using,
unemployment check.
Right. But those, I don't know what the 2 of you do, but using those terms, unless I'm directing the film, I caution not to use directing terms as often as I can. I mean, what do the 2 of you do?
I keep mine very visual, but also as close as I can to a novel. So my screenplays, when you read them, don't have hardly any technical information in them.
Right.
It's because I want the read to be good and fun and pleasant. Most people, when they get a screenplay, if they get all this technical stuff,
Right.
they just kind of, they put the block up and
Exactly.
they don't care to read what the heart of the story is.
Yeah, I mean, there is that whole thing. There is the rule of, you know, you don't want to give direction.
Exactly.
Because like the director's going to read a script and go, they're trying to do my job
Exactly.
for me.
Yeah. And but in no, I was
Go ahead, because there's also the other flip side.
But the other flip side is when you have people who are either starting out or just used to writing in a certain way. They take the internal world of a character, his thoughts, his feelings, all this exposition, and they just bleed it onto the page. And it's so frustrating because that's not staying true, you know?
Yes, that's not screenwriting.
No.
That's not.
There's that. There's also the whole concept of subtext being the words may not have anything to do with the meaning of the scene. You could have a couple that's at the end of the rope. They're talking about the soup, but they're really saying, "I know you cheated on me."
I know. Those are
So
yeah.
it's like, you know, subtlety seems to be something that's missing a lot from screenplays, from first timers.
And you know, killing the darlings, you know, the things that they wrote really well but don't really fit in the screenplay. You know, like maybe there was a really, you know, incredible scene that's been developed and, you know, this incredible dialogue, incredible description, but it doesn't fit the movie and they don't want to let it go. You know, because it's something they created and it's like chop. It's, you know, if it doesn't move the story forward, if it isn't exciting to that particular story, it doesn't belong in that script. Maybe that belongs in a different script, you know? I mean.
That brings up a good thing about kind of the collaborative art.
Right.
How many things have you written that have been produced by other people other than yourself? That's most of your work, right?
A few things have been produced by other people, and tell me your question again, because right now I'm thinking about the last thing I wrote for somebody.
Well, you don't have to, definitely don't have to name names of horror stories kind of thing, but it's more of, tell me about what was it like for you as a screenwriter seeing how somebody else produced your work?
I have two stories. One is, this is the quick story. One is that actually Neil and I wrote something together, Neil, my husband, who you met. We wrote something called Devil's Weed, and it's just this comedy about a bunch of kids hiding in some caves and smoking pot, and they happen to stumble across this mummified corpse of Mary Scott Worth, legendary black sorceress. So they think, cool, we're going to take her home and put her up for a cool Halloween decoration. Little do they know that this thing is cursed, and it comes to life and it slays the whole town, and these glassy-eyed teens have to band together and save their little trailer trash homes. So
So it's a family film.
It's a family film. It's sort of like Dazed and Confused meets The Twilight Zone kind of thing. But we just wrote that for kicks, and we thought, we'd been writing these heady things, and then Neil said, you know what? Nobody's going to buy our heady, artful things. Let's just make a piece of trash that Hollywood will want and buy. I said, okay. So we did. We got some Mountain Dew, some Cheetos, and we sat there, and we worked till 3 in the morning, and we got crazy and just wrote out this crazy stuff. And but somebody in Hollywood became interested in it, and after they read it, they said, we want to option this. We want you guys you can produce it with us if you want. That means they don't have option money when they give you that offer. So we met them. We met with them, and as we were talking with them, she said, I just love the title Devil's Weed. There's just a few things in the script I want to change.
Oh, boy.
By the time we were done with our meeting, about 97% of the script had to be changed. It turns out the only thing she liked was the title, Devil's Weed. She said, I can market that, I can sell that. She said, but I want everything, we'll just change everything around in it. It was a completely different rewrite for the script. That didn't happen. We ended up not doing that deal because it's just not a good deal. But the other thing is, when I wrote for another company, they had written their own screenplay. And they read something that I had written on my own. They said, we really like this, but it's too expensive for us to shoot. So can you take that screenplay that you wrote and sort of put it into this setting that takes place in one lodge? And so I was game. I said, I'll try that, and we'll see what happens. So I gave them 5 scenarios. They took one, they ran with it, and they produced it. However, this is the hard part about being a writer and being in Ohio, and then trying to work with LA. They don't always have money to fly you to the set. They don't like writers on the set. And so I told them up front, all of these scenes take place at night, and it's crucial they take place at night. Why? Because our victims are running away from somebody at night. There are cliffs all around. that ups, you know, the stakes.
The tension is there.
So they're afraid, you know, so there's a reason for them to try to run away at night. To try to not run away at night. They're afraid of falling off of a cliff. So they're sort of captive in a spot. You know, they can stay and be killed by the killer who's after them, or they can run and maybe kill themselves in the process. I said, but it has to take place at night. So they can, because if it was daytime, you would see the cliff.
Right.
Well, so they get on set and they think, it's so hard to shoot at night, let's just turn these scenes into a day shoot. So here are these characters running around, and I ask you, I mean, if somebody's after you, you know, with a high-powered tool, and you don't have anything to protect yourself, and it's daylight, would you just not run? I sure as hell would. I would just run, but no, they act stupid because they didn't call me and say, well, we're making a change in the script. Because all they had to do is pick up the phone or send me an email and call and say, we're turning it into a day shoot, what can we do? Because I would have gladly tried to help remedy the situation
like
for
trying
them.
to find a motive.
Yes, yes.
You would want to find a motive for them.
This will be on the, they're wonderful people.
You're done in this town. You're done in this town.
I do really like actually the people from Devil's Weed and the people from this last shoot that I will not name the title. They're all wonderful people. I actually still work with them.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's just, but again, it comes down to what are the practicalities of shooting. For them, they probably saved 25% of their budget not having to light all those night exteriors.
Sure, I get that.
They sacrificed.
But they sacrificed logic.
Logic, and then of course didn't go to her where she could have offered them an alternative, as opposed to some silly person following, going, oh, when it doesn't work.
Their comeback to me was, oh, it doesn't really matter because it's just a horror movie. Who cares? I'm like, I care. My name's on it.
Most viewers probably care.
Yeah.
Well, yeah. I think that they do. Even people that want to watch schlocky horror, you can still make good schlocky horror. There is a distinct difference between the good and the bad in any genre, be it exploitation, schlock, or what have you. And so I'm all for, you know, communication and bringing writers on board and working with them. If you ever have a problem, that's who to go to and saying, you know, this isn't working. What can we do real quick?
But don't you think that the reason they generally don't is because more times than not, the writer is so married to their words?
Well, yes and no. I think if you're writing for another company, it's really easy to become the rewrite queen. And I think it just depends on from writer to writer, don't you guys?
I would agree with you about that, but what you're saying is a good point. As a director, when I've worked with other writers, sometimes it's very difficult because the writer has created a certain vision, and that ability to accept that the script is a foundation. I don't mean in that case of what happened to you day and night, literally, that doesn't make sense to me, but it, you know, I don't know the snare. But seriously, I do think that it's hard for a director, especially if the writer is very married to the concept they've created in their head. Maybe the actor won't look the way they wanted them to look. Maybe the art direction doesn't match their art direction in their head. And you can't capture all of that a lot of the time as someone who's a director and a writer. But I do think it is from writer to writer at times. It's just, unfortunately, it's not across the board, so then it gets a bad stereotype is don't get the writer on the set.
Right.
You know, I mean...
Because, I mean, I know plenty of writers that are very flexible. They completely understand collaboration. And then I've met the other type of writer where they're so used to autonomy because writing is an autonomous...
It's something you do that's private. I mean, you're alone in the room for 12 hours.
You're creating worlds in your imagination and typing words to create them. Changing that to where we've got 25 to 30 people trying to make this a reality and certain practicalities can supersede the intention of the writer. It's again, it's like, you know, I'm a big believer in collaboration and keeping the writer involved in a shoot as much as possible. But sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't.
Yeah,
but I think in most cases, I mean, it's good to have a writer that can collaborate with the production to find an answer to a problem.
Definitely, because if you let the costume person or the makeup person or anybody else say, well, why don't we just do this? And I can't tell you how many times I've had a development person come in and say, well, we like the script, we want to add a little romance here in this Russian thriller thing. And we're game, we'll try it, we want to appease, you know. But then we find out after 2 years of rewrites that the development person keeps wanting to change something here or there, and we find out, well, what is this development person's background? And we'll come to find out later that, well, they just worked at a phone company before they were hired at this film production company, and they have no training whatsoever in the world of any kind of writing.
They're probably just following trends.
Well, sure, but here's the thing too. A lot of development people, if they don't pipe up and say, well, I think we should do this or this or this, then they're looked at as not necessary, and they feel like, I've got to say something. I've got to say something, because if I don't say anything, if I don't have any input here, they're going to look at me as being unnecessary, and then there goes my job.
So they're just justifying.
So it's just, you have, but this is true. I mean, that's part of the whole collaboration process. Everybody jumps on the wagon and says what they will. But as a writer, I mean, I've learned to let go, and it's a hard thing to learn to do, to let go of your words. But eventually, when you start making your own cuts on your screenplays, you find that you actually start enjoying it. In fact, one of the things I enjoy now more than any part of writing is rewriting, because I know I'll go back to it and say, "Oh, that's really crappy. Let me change this. Yeah, that feels better." And it just like a bottle of wine, you know, sometimes it just has to sit there and
not that screenwriters are alcoholics by any means.
Right. We were just talking about that earlier about the myth that writers are all smokers
and drinkers,
caffeine fiends.
Yeah.
We just realized that
we're all sitting around like Hemingway, brooding, you know, over the typewriter and thinking of the bulls in Spain.
Only Josh.
Oh, it is Josh, actually.
No, not even me.
Oh.
So, all right, you've got this script. You think it's great. What's the next? What do you, when you start packaging a movie? Bo, we'll start with you. What do you start looking for directors? You look cast? Do you think about?
It depends on where you're taking the movie and what level you're taking the movie. If you're doing it yourself and you're raising the money, if it's a small amount of money, then you can start packaging it the way that you want it. If you're taking that project and you're pitching it to investors and they want bigger people in or whatever, then you kind of reserve some of those things to stay open. You don't want to bring necessarily a package in and say, hey, my brother's directing and my sister's going to be starring in it and we want $5 million, and they say, that's not going to happen. And then you're out the door. Now, if you come in and you've got a good script and they say, you know what, this is great, I can get so-and-so, but so-and-so wants so-and-so to direct. And that person gets to, and then, you get a $5 million movie and you kind of have to live with some things. It's all about making some compromises and trying to get the best team that you can, but ultimately, you're not going to get everything you want. We just went and pitched a movie down in Savannah, and we're talking to some investors, and the conversation started like, we really love the title, and that was it. And it was kind of open from there. Wow, we got a lot of stuff to work on, don't we? So, I mean, you really have to. We thought we had a great project, and we went in, and they said, we really love the title. Let's make a movie, but we got to change the script. So,
I remember Charlie Band would just make a movie poster and just say, "Here, write a movie about this."
Right, and that's kind of the way it felt. And then we just started brainstorming, and new ideas came, and we kind of went with it and began writing a new draft, and it changed the script a lot.
Gotcha. So, Phil, what's your development process once you've kind of got the concept and the script in a form? I mean, the script is always being rewritten up till like the picture is locked, but what do you do with it after you've got that script? What's the next step for you?
Well, it comes down to the packaging of it has to make it attractive to people who see it as a commercial property. So they want to see it as a sellable property, a project or property. So for them, it typically can't just hang on the script. The script can be great, but there are a lot of other elements that you need. And in this day and age, if you're going to make your money back, you have to have a name in your movie.
I
agree.
It's
a feature film, you have to have a name. You have to have a name that people are going to know, particularly a younger crowd than I happen to be in right now. So it has to be a face, a name that's going to sell DVDs, right? So you sort of make your wish list. In putting together a package, you make your wish list of talent, but you also start to look at the business angle. Okay. How can this movie be sold? How can it make its money back? And the reason you're so focused on that, as you know,
yes,
is people want to know that there's a chance they'll make their money back. And in this business, when you're raising funds privately,
the first thing you have to tell them is, by the way, on page 1, you can lose all of your money. So you want the rest of the package to try to mitigate that and try to show them the potential for how this movie can pay off. So it's kind of this combination of what would make you happy as a producer or as a creative team in terms of casting, in terms of what format you're going to shoot it on, all sorts of considerations, design, production design, getting all that stuff going. What's going to make you happy, but what's going to show them that you're doing everything that you can to not lose their money.
Yeah. No, it's important. So, you've got your script done. What's your next thing?
Well, again, to reiterate what they said, it really depends on the project and, and what market you're going into. I think with, in a lot of the shorts that I did, that was certainly on our mind. It was trying to get some name talent, and we got a few name people in there that weren't big names, but they were, they were people that had been on some prominent roles in television, and for us, that was enough to get it into the festivals we needed to get it into, and to get it into the, some of the arenas. But, if I keep bringing it back to 8 and 5, because I was told I need to.
Sell.
Right. No, I mean, it really is. I mean, I talk about this just because it's such a unique experience to everything else I've done. And, like Phil said, on my first feature, I spent all the focus was on raising the money, finding, a way to make it sell. Making the movie was so secondary. I mean, it really was. And that experience has always sort of turned me off to that way of doing things, even though it's essential. You have to sort of approach a commercial product that way. And I think why 8 and 5 is such a kind of a refreshing way of working at the moment is we sort of, it's in a market that's still relatively new. The web market we got in right at a time when it was just taking off, and so people were far more forgiving of not having big name stars in your work, and you can still get noticed as long as you have a high concept or a unique project. And so we just sort of fell into that sweet spot because we're there at the right time in the right place. Now that's changing. I mean, it's starting to move into just like every other business model where you have to have a lead or some kind of name or attachment or product attachment to your work. But it's been incredibly refreshing because 8 and 5 has kind of broken all the rules that we've had to do all along. It's a no-budget project. It's completely community-driven. It's all volunteer cast and crew. We have no big names attached to it. And it's people all doing what we love, which is to make films and be able to kind of get it out there into the marketplace.
Yeah, for those who don't know, 8 and 5 started out as a 48-hour film project and did very well, and then it spawned a series.
Okay, further on, let's talk a little bit about, what are things you've either done or seen that it's kind of like, think of it more like this way. What would you say, if looking back, if you could have been an advisor now to yourself as when you're first directing, what would you tell yourself? What is it that maybe you did that was the most kind of, the thing you thought was kind of the worst offense you might have done that you would want to see undone if you could do that?
Wore too many hats.
Really?
Oh yeah. I mean, I was behind the camera, in front of the camera, and my co-stars had to tell me sometimes, okay, take that behind the camera scene hat off, get in front of the camera and get that person on, get in character, those type of things. So the second time around it was a lot easier. I slashed down my role some, but I enjoyed doing both really. But I think it hurt the project just a little bit if you're not experienced, because I wasn't experienced at doing it. I mean, I was new at everything except for the acting part.
So the big thing for you was really being an actor in the scene. That really ripped you. It was tearing your concentration apart, you think?
Yeah, sometimes. Sometimes I'm worried about, okay, I hope they got this right. Okay, are they doing this? All right, stop. Did y'all have that? Okay, those type of thing. How the shot look. And so just too many hats in the beginning.
I just feel like a lot of times people try to bite off more than they can chew, and then you just get yourself in trouble.
Like what? What's an example of that?
Or just like even, even the first 48 hour that we did, we were like, oh, we're gonna do this and this and this and this, and it was like 8 o'clock Saturday night, and we're like, our actors had to go. it was just we ended up pulling it together, but it was definitely a learning
So like
experience.
what percentage of what you intended did you actually get done then?
Like probably like 45%.
So
So
we
just
wanna
keep
do
it short and
this.
sweet, I think, and concentrate on the script. It's all starts with the script. Keep it short and sweet. Know what you can do, and concentrate on doing that well, as opposed to this grand idea that you have.
I'm a big proponent for, but I don't disrespect people that go straight for features. But I'm a big believer in like you do shorts and kind of graduate to features.
I probably would have done that had I known better.
Well, for me, it's more of like, you learn to write a sentence before you write a novel in a lot of ways. So you learn how to write a sentence structure before you really try to tackle a novel. But at the same time, there are people that are like, what good is a short? There's people that feel that way, and I don't disrespect it. Even if I disagree with it, I don't disrespect that opinion.
Yeah, but I think my thing was I didn't write a short story first. I wrote a novel. I didn't write a short movie or a short. I wrote a feature. And so because I was looking to try to maybe option it somehow or another, and it never got to that point, hey, shoot it yourself. So I got some people, like I said before, Craig Short, John Whitty, some other people, and they helped me get started.
But do you regret doing a feature before you did a short?
I think I spent a lot of money on and not having the quality that I wanted. So in that regard, yes. But overall, I still don't have any regrets, because I still love it. I love what the finished product, but I think quality-wise, it suffered a lot of ways.
Well, what did you find in terms of editing? What did you really learn more as you went between editing from where you started to where you are now?
When you think it's there, keep cutting. I just feel like it can always be cut. You're so afraid, especially if you're editing it yourself. This is my baby, I don't want to cut it down. You're so attached to the scenes, but no, you just gotta cut the fat.
Yeah, I think I learned on the job training again, as with everything in the first movie. So as I watched the editor edit, I just learned everything I could. And so when I shot the second one, I shot with the edit in mind. And so that helped me out a lot. So I went in and edited primarily most of it myself the second time. So I was confident at that time.
So in the first one, when you worked with an editor, did you find that they maybe wanted to cut lines or something that you really wanted to keep? Did you ever have those kind of conversations?
Yeah, we almost went to blows a couple times.
Well, that's actually good that you almost did, because if the best thing about that is you have a collaborator that's passionate about their opinions too.
Right. And I had to respect that.
And that's the thing about it, is that fight, whether it came to blows or not, could determine making the best movie possible.
It's just an interesting, you bringing up it being collaborative. It is, and yet mostly I think one person owns the vision.
Would you call it the director or the producer?
Right. Good question. I try to be both. That way
Whoever
I
had
solve
the
that
money.
problem.
Yeah, I mean,
you have to have the person, right? I don't know. I don't know if there's a right place to put it, but it could be the editor, but it has to be somebody, I think.
Most people are writer-producers that think that they're writer-directors, because a lot of the things that people do in making indie films today, when you say indie film, I'm talking about like these DSLR or camcorder shoots, most people are writer-producers that think they're writer-directors. Because director and a film by credit is the sexy title, that's what everybody wants, but they don't understand is what they're actually doing is producing and not directing. Because, the art form of directing, and by the way, talking about myself more than anybody else, because that's what I was for the first 7 or 8 years of my filmmaking career. I was a writer-producer that thought he was a writer-director. So as angry as I may sound about other people, I'm really talking about myself, quite genuinely. And it's like, I'm still very much learning what the art form of directing is. What is directing to you?
I think it's different with everybody, because for me personally, when we're on set, I'm just like totally relaxed, and I let the actors kind of do their thing. I'm not like overly do it this way. I just kind of like trust the actors and let them do their thing. That's I mean that's at least that's how I
But
am.
what do you, but again, it's more of what is the definition of directing to you? Like, what does that entail? What are your responsibilities as a director?
I mean, getting the best out of your talent.
It's one of the things where you're just trying to get. I don't know. I'm like, man, I'm all about the talent, because I heard a guy say sometimes, man, you let the actors do what they do. I just direct the shots and I direct everything else. I don't know.
But is that your view too? That like you're more interested in
I'm more the actors. I'm more actors. I like to lead the camera to the cameraman. We discuss what I see. Then if he can do it, get the shot I want, then that's on him. But I'm more with the actors.
Where do you land on that?
I've had some conversations with people who say they're really aggravated by line reads. Don't give me a line read. I'm talent. I know how to do it. And I appreciate that. I wonder about the structure of a short versus a feature, and the assembly of the story, and its sequencing, and how much, I guess you'd call it, control is required to get to the payoff in 4 minutes versus, what I want to do more of is letting the actors act. I'm curious. I need to learn more about the structure. But sorry, your question was definition of director. I think directors' responsibilities are to own the vision for the product, own the heart of the vision of the product, be a great team leader who gets people aligned with the vision, and I think is smart what Vic said about get the best out of your talent. That could look different.
Talent covers in front of the camera and behind the camera. Yeah. Well, on your features, what was like your biggest day with the most people, and how many people did you have to wrangle?
Crew, probably about 8.
Really? That's the largest your crew got?
Yeah, and the smallest was maybe 3.
So you always had your camera and your sound covered, right?
Oh yeah, tried to.
What's the average size of your crew then?
It's same thing. Ranges from 2 or 3 or 4 people to big day 15.
This wraps up kind of the roundtable for first-time filmmaker advice. I want to thank everybody for coming.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
Okay, so we're going to start with some basic questions. How did you get started in kind of filmmaking and specifically acting for you?
My great-grandfather had a movie camera when I was growing up, and I eventually inherited it. And I think I made my first movie when I was about 12 in 1982 with some guys in the neighborhood, and that was the debut of writing, acting, directing, and doing all of it. So yeah, when I was 12, and then just from there, in school, drama class, and things like that.
Maya?
When I was in elementary school, I did my first play, and I sort of got bitten by the bug of acting, and been doing it ever since, really. I got to go to college for musical theater, and now I do this, I guess.
Vince, how did you get started? You started as a writer?
Well, actually, no, I started off as an actor. I went to school in Chicago to be an actor, and then I I got into writing, started writing plays and things like that, and then fell more in love into the writing aspect. And then graduated from college, a bunch of us decided to do a short film, and I wrote it and acted in it as well. This is when I was living in Chicago, and it got on a PBS and stuff like that. And so I thought, hey, I'd like to do this, and that's why I got involved with film. So I got like Maya said, I got the bug, and so yeah.
So how do you feel that like the whole filmmaking scene has changed over the last 10 years thanks to like digital video? Do you think it's had an effect?
I think digital technology has had an effect on any creative person, whether they've been doing music or whether they're doing visual media or whether they're doing film, motion pictures, I would like to call them, because that includes film and digital video, and it keeps everything pure.
Yeah, I always say movies.
Yeah, yeah.
I don't like to say film because I've shot film and I've shot videos, so I always just say movies.
Yeah, movies it's that moving picture image thing. But I think the price of entry of being able to get a decent picture with decent audio that's editable and watchable, the price of admission to that world is greatly reduced because of all the digital toys we have. Almost everybody has a home computer. For a couple $100 you can have software enough to edit.
Not even a
and
couple
not
of
even
bucks.
that. Some of it's free online.
No, it's all free. I mean, with iMovie comes with a Mac.
Yeah.
Windows Movie Maker comes with any PC. I mean, and video editing doesn't cost anything today. And
that's true.
Even those most basic programs, 95% of what you do as an editor is there.
Just basic cuts, yeah. And you're right. It's the price of admission to get something from idea to a watchable moving picture, and even the distribution network, which can be online through YouTube or various sites. That's all free too, and the world can watch what you've done, and for very little investment. Of course, doesn't mean that everything is good out there or that the quality is high. There's a mix of things out there, but the price of admission is really gone down because of the availability of digital technology. Yeah.
So have you found that you're like getting more roles because of this like digital technology? You find that there's suddenly more movie work as opposed to what there was like even 10 years ago?
Absolutely. Yeah, the opportunities have opened up a little bit. I mean, the floodgates haven't opened, and the ocean isn't trying to wash me away with acting roles or anything yet, but it's definitely opened up the doors.
So you started to get involved in that even arena too. Is that kind of what your film you were just talking about was in that kind of realm?
No, well, we did that we shot that on 16 millimeter, and that was very important to get the right lighting people, to get all that stuff, and it was very technical. And then when I got into digital video, it was a lot easier to make film. Brian and I did another film where we flew a guy in from LA to be our cinematographer, got a lighting kit, and it looked just as good as anything that we shot in 16 millimeter. It was cheaper, a lot more versatile. We could do a lot more things with it, and so yeah, I mean, it's a wonderful tool for everybody.
So tell me about some of the other projects you've done as an actor, like over the last few years.
Well, I really didn't start doing. I tried to make a movie with John Jackson back in 1987. It's the first time he and I had access to something called a camcorder, which was not just a video camera, but you could actually like tape with the people today, they just take for granted you put the tape in the camera, but back then it was a camera with a wire that went to a VCR that you strapped to your side. And I had access to one of these, and we were in high school and we were setting out to make a Raiders of the Lost Ark type story. It was called Indiana Jones and the Towers of Tahiara. It was a story that I was working on, and that got sidelined. It never saw the light of day, but we had a blast messing with all that stuff. And then I didn't get back into making things digitally until I met Vitas about 10 years ago, and he was casting for his film Dreamtime. And we became friends on that shoot, and we've had a successful collaboration ever since, off and on, with different projects. But that was the first one, and then I've done some smaller parts for folks locally. Just some of them shot on film, and some of them were just last-minute things. I'd show up and do a bit part. I did a few things for Ben Bays, usually playing the bad guy with no lines, standing in the background and scowling at somebody.
That's right.
But that seemed to be my stock in trade, and so yeah, but not a whole lot really. I haven't done a whole lot of acting, but I do work in production for a living, and so I'm around this stuff all the time. I do write, I do cast, I direct, I produce. So I've had my fingers in media professionally probably for the last almost 15 years now.
So let's talk about Dreamtime since you brought it up.
Okay.
Then we'll get over to you.
Oh, that's fine.
But let's talk about Dreamtime. It's kind of like what was the thought process from that? You went from 16mm film to digital video.
Yeah. Well, what was interesting is that I wrote it when I was living in Chicago, and everybody told me it was going to be way too expensive to make because the film itself has got a few different sets, but at the end when people go behind into the dream world, I had a lot of extras and different costumes. And so I was told, oh, it's too expensive, it's too expensive, it's too expensive. I moved to Columbus, Ohio, and meet people who were like, oh yeah, we can do this, no problem. And everything that we did, we almost got for free. I remember I called Ohio State and I said, hey, I'm looking for a building, or I'm looking for a hallway. And they said, fine, you can have the engineering building, we'll give you a security person, and it cost me like $10. And then all the people that came as extras, it was basically people put out a cattle call and said, hey, this guy's doing a film. And I had literally 60 people show up in costume, you know, and I just on their own, and I just had to feed them all. And so it was, that to me was very different from doing film in Chicago than doing it here in Central Ohio. In Chicago, it seemed everywhere that we went, they wanted money, they wanted to do this. Not trying to put anything down, but here it just seemed like people were a lot more receptive and open to making like independent film. So we had a lot of success, and I thought, you know, it was a great experience. I thought it turned out great. So
yeah, it does seem like, you know, with digital video, it makes filmmaking is kind of like the new garage band. It seems like everybody's making movies now because they can. They're not necessarily making good movies, but they are making movies. And there are more good movies as opposed to before, but there's a lot more bad movies than there were before. Yeah. But one of the things is, I remember you were in a very professional-looking product, The Courier from Greg Sabo. How did you get involved with The Courier?
Oh, gosh. A few years before The Courier, I had worked with Jared Green on an independent project. And he called me up one day and said, hey, these guys are doing this movie. It's called The Courier. I think it's going to be good. You should come audition. So I went in and I actually auditioned for a completely different role. And then I guess last minute they had a casting snafu and they said, hey, could you play this character instead? And I said, sure. And it was fun.
Yeah, you got to be the girl with a shotgun.
Yes, I did. I had actually never shot a gun before I had to shoot that large shotgun. It was interesting.
So you'd never even really fired a weapon before?
Never.
That had to have been fun.
Yeah, it was fun.
It was empowering, right?
Yes, I mean, they were blanks, but they were blanks that had a kick.
Cool. Any other film-like projects? Do you do commercial work then, too?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, mainly I do commercials and industrials. I do some voiceovers as well. But yeah, it's mainly based here in Columbus, but I have been traveling more recently to the outer edges, I guess.
Okay. Talking about criticism to independent filmmakers, do you feel obligated to give them something positive if you know that, like you were saying, it's the beginning of their filmmaking career? You do, whether you take that into account or not, do you feel it important to say anything positive about a film when criticizing it?
I think you have to say something positive, even if it's a bad film, even if you didn't like it. You can find something positive. Well, I have seen one or two movies that I found nothing positive in on the independent side, but it's rare, and those you just kind of bite your tongue. But I think any movie that somebody does, you can find something positive in. And
you really cut up the documentary on my third honeymoon.
It was a movie called
Front Porch.
I did not like the ending.
But I think there are plenty of reviewers out there. I think there are plenty of reviewers out there that don't care if they say anything positive at all. Yeah. So I think it's nice that you try to find something positive, or the thing in it that was most successful.
For an independent.
Especially for an independent, because it's so hard for anybody to make a movie, even if you have $200 million in the bank to do it. It's so difficult. So it is nice for someone that they regard as someone to say something positive about their work, you know.
Do you approach documentaries, that genre, differently than you would a theatrical film? And how much does the subject of the documentary and how you feel about that documentary influence how you critique the movie?
It depends, because there are
well,
documentaries are an interesting little monster, because part of it is after sort of like in a post Michael Moore world, who really kind of manufactures a little more than he really should. Right. And then you've got like imitators like Morgan Spurlock, who does kind of the same thing and kind of comes with a definitive view that sort of is different than the old-fashioned documentary where it's like, we're going to film this.
Talking heads and blah, blah, blah.
And whatever happens, happens. So there's a little bit of leeway with the documentary, because it doesn't always have a great ending. It doesn't always resolve, and it doesn't quite always follow a plot. So I think you've got to take that differently. But again, I've always said good filmmaking is good filmmaking. I've seen bad documentaries, and you're just like, that's just not well constructed, and it doesn't work. And if it's coming with such a specific opinion, and it's trying to, take something like Waiting for Superman.
That was the one I was just thinking of.
Yeah, I was
Absolutely,
thinking of
yeah.
that too. Which I
I'm
think-
down on it because I don't like what they did in the movie.
Well, what bothers me about Waiting for Superman isn't it's the
You're
fact
brilliant.
that
You are brilliant.
Yeah, I figured out that that's what you're talking. Well, thank you, Clay. But at the very end, it's very clear. It just becomes an ad for charter schools, and it takes off all pretense of being. We're going to find this from a documentary perspective, and it says, "Here's what we're trying to say. This is what we were all leading up to." And I think that's having greater impact even in Ohio with budgetary issues, and it's
They
changing
showed it.
people's
The
opinion.
governor showed it to a select number of people.
And I think that there's a lot of flaws in there, and that's the problem with approaching a documentary with a point of view to make a point.
That's tough not to.
It's very tough not to.
It's having an agenda it changes the nature of what you're doing. I mean,
Well, because the nature of documentary, you get hours and hours and hours and hours and hours of footage, and you have to make decisions. And if you know what you're going to say beforehand, you're just like, I don't need that. Let's get rid of all
You
that.
can omit the facts because you don't feel like showing them.
Or the ones, yeah.
And in a sense, it's no more true than the theatrical film can speak truth.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Documentaries, because they're documentaries, doesn't mean they're more true.
Oh, absolutely.
I mean, we know that.
Yeah.
Not everybody knows that.
Yeah.
But
We're a
again,
select few.
talking about how important do you think criticism is to an independent filmmaker? Let's start with Kelly on this
Well,
one.
do you mean once their film is done, how
Yeah.
to get it out there, to get it seen?
How important is it for, let's just take, for example, you have an independent filmmaker somewhere in Ohio that made a film, they sent it to you as a critic to review it. How important is it your criticism to them?
Oh, I think very important. I think, well, you guys, and I can't remember if it was here, but we were talking about film, like pulling quotes from reviews and things. Even if they're good or bad, a quote on a poster or on a DVD cover, most, Jack and Jane thinks, oh, that movie, that's worthy of review. A reviewer saw that, and good or bad. So an independent film, if I'm going to review it and people listen to me, as I hope they do, good or bad, I think that's helpful. I mean, isn't that what we're saying? I mean, so.
But that's very true, and that's a really good point. But what about the actual criticism itself? How important is that to the independent filmmaker?
Oh, I think it's constructive. I think it's helpful. You're giving me a
I
look.
just think it depends on the filmmaker. Some people will think that what they have is gold no matter what criticism they receive, and some people will take the criticism to heart and say, well, I need to look at my film a little differently. So I think it depends on the filmmaker, and it depends on
how open they are to it.
Yeah. And
I think some filmmakers need to be, if they got a bad film or they've got problems, they need to be at least told they have problems.
Sure.
Because again, these are people that are starting out.
Hopefully going on from that.
And if they're smart, they'll say, oh, that's only Clay Lowe, or that's only Kevin, or that's only Kelly.
It's very, very hard to take criticism of your work, and you live with a film, and and you make a film, and you spend a lot of time and money, and you've mortgaged your life sometimes on these things. And then if somebody's like, yeah, it wasn't that good, it hurts. I mean, it stings.
Sure.
But sometimes you need to have that happen, even if you're not going to take it to heart. I think it's important. If you want to really honestly be a filmmaker and you want to break out beyond the independent realm and even just beyond the grassroots independent realm, you need to hear criticism because, I mean, so what? Your mom loves it. That's wonderful.
Yeah. Great.
But, and that's good to have that. It's good to have that support system. But if no one's telling you this isn't good, you need to change this. This is terrible. This has been done a million times or whatever. Even in the most constructive way, it's important for some people to hear that. I think everybody needs to hear that.
But some people, some critics enjoy trashing a film because it's so much fun to trash a film.
Right.
So, but I don't usually trash a film.
Sure.
I
I'll
don't
trash
usually
films
do
all
that.
the time. Well, and I think if you get a movie that's like outside of the independent realm, but even in the studio realm, if you're getting something from like The Asylum, and you're doing Mega Shark versus Giant Octopus 2, you can look at it and be like, they're not trying to make something fantastic. They're just making a schlocky movie, and I take that into consideration. So I think you can take into consideration a lot of things surrounding it.
Well, we faced something similar with Ain't It Cool News, didn't we?
Right.
Do tell.
Yes, we did. What do you want to say about that?
Just tell the story.
So their initial review was.
Well, I mean, we sent a copy of our movie.
We dropped it off at Drew McQueenie. I dropped it off at Drew McQueenie's doorstep when we were in LA, and lo and behold, a review showed up. I don't know how long later, and
6-7 weeks.
Yeah, and then what happened?
The first review was they destroyed the movie. They just said,
Was it Drew who reviewed it?
No.
Shall we say the title of the film that we're discussing?
Well, it's Horrors of War.
Okay.
Is the name of the film.
Trying not to
which is a
say
super.
the film.
It's a super 16 millimeter blended genre film, sci-fi action horror war movie.
What it comes
War.
down to is they got this movie and they said, this is low budget crap, we hate it. And then, you know, after you feel like somebody punched you and you couldn't breathe, we both did something that most filmmakers should do that don't, is we wrote thank you emails. It's totally independent of each other. We wrote thank you emails to the guy who wrote